$13 trillion. That is the number that Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse just revealed in a television interview on Fox Business. $13 trillion in annual fiat payments flowing through Ripple Treasury? The platform Ripple acquired for $1 billion last year? Every single year. $13,000 billion. Moving through Ripple's infrastructure every single year. And here's the number that makes 13 trillion feel even more extraordinary. Zero. 0% of that $13 trillion currently moves through any cryptocurrency. Not Bitcoin, not Ethereum, not RLUSD, and not XRP. 0% of $13 trillion. When Garlinghouse pointed to that gap, that chasm between $13 trillion moving through Ripple's infrastructure and zero of it currently using crypto rails, he called it the biggest untapped opportunity in all of finance. And he is right. But there is a problem hiding inside the story. A specific problem that determines whether this $13 trillion opportunity is the greatest XRP catalyst in history, or whether it is yet another piece of good Ripple news that helps Ripple the company and does absolutely nothing for XRP the token. I found that problem. And in the next 12 minutes, I am going to show it to you clearly, step by step. Because if you hold XRP right now, you need to understand this problem before you make any decision about your position. Stay with me. This is the most important thing you will hear about XRP this week. Step 1. What the $13 trillion opportunity actually is and why it is real. Let me make sure you understand what Ripple Treasury actually is. Because this is not a vague announcement. This is a specific business with specific clients and specific numbers. Ripple Treasury is the platform Ripple acquired when it bought a company called Treasury for $1 billion in October 2025. Treasury was renamed Ripple Treasury after the acquisition. What does Ripple Treasury actually do? Large corporations, Fortune 500 companies, multinational businesses have something called a treasury department. This is the team inside the company that manages all the company's money. Cash flows, foreign currency, international payments, risk management, investments, everything involving the company's financial position. Treasury management software is what these teams use every day to do their jobs. And Ripple Treasury is now one of the most widely used treasury management platforms in the corporate world. Here are the specific numbers that prove this is real. Ripple Treasury connects to over 13,000 banks worldwide. 13,000 banks. That means when a Fortune 500 company uses Ripple Treasury to move money, they can send it to or receive it from 13,000 different banking institutions around the world through one platform. Ripple Treasury has over 1,000 corporate clients, including companies you know personally: Volvo, Subway, STIHL. These are not obscure businesses. These are global brands with hundreds of billions in annual revenue between them. And the total annual payment volume flowing through these corporate clients through this network is $13 trillion per year. This is not a prediction. This is not a target. This is the current annual volume of real corporate payments flowing through infrastructure that Ripple now owns. Brad Garlinghouse knows this number. He knows that $13 trillion is sitting inside his company's infrastructure. And he knows that 0% of it currently uses cryptocurrency for settlement. And he is telling the world that this gap represents the biggest untapped opportunity in finance. He is right. The question is, who benefits from closing that gap? Step 2. The hidden problem that could mean XRP gets nothing. Now I need to show you the problem. The specific problem that determines whether you benefit from this $13 trillion opportunity. Here is the critical question. When companies start moving their $13 trillion through crypto rails instead of traditional fiat rails, what cryptocurrency do they use to do it? The obvious answer that every XRP holder wants to hear is XRP. But the honest answer based on what is actually happening right now in 2026 is more complicated. Look at what Deutsche Bank chose when it integrated Ripple's payment infrastructure. Deutsche Bank is settling in RLUSD and fiat currencies, not XRP. Look at what Société Générale shows. RLUSD and fiat, not XRP. Look at what Aviva investors chose. RLUSD and fiat, not XRP. The world's biggest financial institutions are adopting Ripple's infrastructure in 2026, and they are overwhelmingly choosing RLUSD, Ripple's own dollar stablecoin, or traditional fiat currencies for settlement, not XRP. Now remember what I said in my previous videos about on-demand liquidity. The only Ripple product that creates direct buying and selling demand for XRP is on-demand liquidity. The product that uses XRP as a bridge currency for cross-border payments between non-dollar currency pairs. If the $13 trillion Ripple Treasury opportunity gets settled in RLUSD and fiat, XRP token holders benefit exactly as much as they benefited from Deutsche Bank adopting Ripple, which was zero, because Deutsche Bank used RLUSD, not XRP. Ripple wins. XRP holders wait. This is the hidden problem, and it is not a theoretical problem. It is happening right now. Today, with real banks, with real money, and with real consequences for everyone holding XRP. Step 3. Why banks are choosing RLUSD over XRP, and whether that can change. You deserve to understand exactly why banks are choosing RLUSD over XRP. Because this is not a random preference, there is a specific legal reason behind every single choice. When a bank uses RLUSD to settle a payment, it is using a US dollar stablecoin, always worth $1, no volatility risk. The bank knows exactly what it is holding at every moment. For a bank's compliance department, this is easy to approve. There is no price risk. There is no currency risk. There is regulatory precedent for holding dollar-denominated assets. When a bank uses XRP to settle a payment through on-demand liquidity, it briefly holds XRP on its balance sheet for the seconds it takes to complete the transfer. XRP's price fluctuates. For a fiduciary institution, an institution that is legally obligated to protect its clients' assets, holding a volatile asset on the balance sheet even for seconds creates legal liability. Right now in 2026, there is no federal law that specifically defines how XRP can be classified and held by regulated financial institutions. There is no permanent legal framework saying that U.S. banks can hold XRP for settlement purposes without it creating compliance problems. Until that law exists, most U.S. fiduciary institutions will default to RLUSD, because RLUSD is safe. RLUSD has regulatory clarity. RLUSD does not create compliance problems, and that law, the law that would change everything, is called the Clarity Act. Step 4. The Clarity Act, the one thing standing between XRP and $13 trillion. Let me tell you exactly what the Clarity Act is and why it is the most important piece of legislation for XRP that has ever been proposed. The Clarity Act is a bill currently being debated in the United States Congress. It establishes a permanent federal legal framework for digital assets, including XRP. When it passes, XRP receives an official classification under U.S. federal law that makes it unambiguously legal for regulated institutions to use as a settlement currency. When the Clarity Act passes, the compliance barriers that are currently forcing banks to choose RLUSD over XRP disappear. Every fiduciary institution, every pension fund, every Fortune 500 Treasury Department, every bank using Ripple's infrastructure, all of them get the legal permission they need to run on-demand liquidity corridors with XRP. When that happens, even 5% of that $13 trillion annual payment volume routing through XRP as a bridge currency would create $650 billion per year in XRP transactions. $650 billion in annual on-demand liquidity volume. That is not a bull case fantasy. That is 5% of a number that already exists inside Ripple's infrastructure today. Brad Garlinghouse himself is pushing for the Clarity Act to pass by end of April. The Senate is in recess until April 13th. The Banking Committee markup has not been formally scheduled yet, but Garlinghouse believes it will happen. The Clarity Act is the switch. The 13 trillion is already there waiting. The switch is the only thing between XRP and its most explosive catalyst in history. Step 5. The specific date that XRP holders need to have circled right now. I told you in my last video that April 8th was an important date for XRP. The SEC remedies brief for Ripple's final case settlement was due on that date. That date is still coming in 6 days, and it still matters. The size of the SEC's proposed penalty will tell you whether Ripple has the financial freedom to accelerate on-demand liquidity expansion, or whether it is constrained by a massive legal bill. But now there is an additional important date range to watch. April 13th. That is when the U.S. Senate returns from recess. That is the first day the Clarity Act can realistically move forward in the legislative process. Watch what happens in the Senate Banking Committee in the week following April 13th. If the markup gets scheduled, if the bill advances in committee, the timeline for XRP unlocking its share of the $13 trillion compresses dramatically. Garlinghouse wants passage by end of April. The Senate returns April 13th. The window between April 13th and April 30th is potentially the most important 2 weeks in XRP's entire history. Watch that window, every day of that window, because the moment the Clarity Act advances in committee, the market will start pricing in the $13 trillion opportunity before the bill even passes. Prices move on expectations, not on events. And expectations change the moment that Senate committee vote gets scheduled. Step 6. My honest conclusion on the $13 trillion opportunity. Let me pull everything together. Here is my complete honest assessment. The $13 trillion opportunity is real. It is documented. It is not marketing language from Ripple. It is actual annual payment volume running through infrastructure that Ripple owns today. The problem is also real. Right now, banks are choosing RLUSD and fiat over XRP. Not because XRP is inferior technology, but because there is no federal legal framework giving regulated institutions permission to use XRP for settlement without compliance risk. The solution is specific. The Clarity Act. One bill, one vote, one signature. And every barrier between XRP and $13 trillion falls simultaneously. The timeline is short. The Senate returns April 13th. Garlinghouse wants passage by end of April. The SEC remedies brief lands April 8th. In the next 30 days, more happens for XRP's fundamental story than in the previous 30 weeks combined. My honest conclusion. If you are holding XRP and you are frustrated by the price, understand that the frustration is justified by the current reality. Banks are choosing RLUSD. The $13 trillion is not flowing through XRP yet. The price reflects the current reality accurately. But if the Clarity Act passes in April, the current reality changes instantly. The $13 trillion does not flow through XRP overnight, but the market will price in the possibility that it eventually will. And the price move that comes with that pricing in will be significant. The $13 trillion opportunity is not a fairy tale. It is math. 13 trillion exists. 0% of it uses XRP. The Clarity Act converts 0% into whatever percentage U.S. banks decide to use. Even 1% is $130 billion. Even 0.5% is $65 billion. That math is what the XRP price is not reflecting right now. But it will. When the Clarity Act passes, it will. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Clarity Act will pass before the end of April? Type yes if you believe Garlinghouse's timeline and XRP gets the 13 trillion opportunity this month. Type no if you think the Senate will delay it beyond April and XRP holders keep waiting. And type maybe if you think it advances but does not fully pass until May or June. Drop your answer in the comments right now. This is the most important legislative question for XRP in 2026, and I want to know what this community believes. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell immediately, because when the Senate Banking Committee schedules the Clarity Act markup, I am posting a video within hours, not days. Hours. That video will tell you exactly what the scheduling means for the $13 trillion opportunity and for your XRP position. You cannot afford to miss that notification. Subscribe now. Thank you for watching. I will see you when the Senate returns on April 13th. And I will see you in the next one.